And we are live. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Balanced Meal podcast series. And tonight's episode is another segment of the We Were in a Cult, where I talk to former members of the ICOC and we have a conversation about what all that mess that we were in was, talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and just trying to figure out and get our finger on what it was that we were in. And for this episode, I have Jon. Go ahead and say hi, Jon.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Roy.
Hey, man, I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad that people want to come on and talk about this. I'm glad it's, you and I go way back, which is bananas. And it's just funny that, yeah, it's funny that we're adults now.
Yeah, I mean, funny, weird, strange.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I remember you in my mind as always as an adult. Uh, because I was always the kid at that point in time.
Yep.
So yeah.
I know this is it's weird that you say that, and I think you're not the first one that's ever said that. I'm just kind of getting used to that. But I mean, I was definitely not an adult the first time I met you. I was probably like 13, 14.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
So,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't even say that I'm an adult now, but whatever. So,
Who can determine that? Yeah.
yeah. Um, so as always, first question. So, were you a Kingdom kid or were you Met?
I was a Kingdom kid, yeah. I've spent a majority of my life in the ICO scene and part of this church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that I think my mom got baptized in like 89 up in the north or either in North Carolina, something like that. And then my dad got baptized in 92
Uh-huh.
around the same time that my brother and I were born.
Okay.
So we have been in it.
Yeah. You were in it from the beginning.
Yeah.
So like what was what was it? I like to know, I like to ask this too. Like when I say God, like as a kid, what comes to mind? What came to mind when you were
I
a
mean,
kid?
yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing that everybody else does. Is like what we were taught, especially in like in the Kingdom Kids classes and stuff, was like God is our Father.
Yeah.
Um, I did really find it. I found it hilarious. I think it was last week's episode. Um, Karen was calling him Sky Daddy.
Sky
Uh,
Daddy. Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, we always looked at God as like a father, like he's just
Hmm.
watching over all of us, taking care of us, that kind of thing. Um, which it's interesting. And I'll say this when it came to thinking about God the Father, or as a father, I had to, we would equate him to our own dad, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
But for when I was growing up, my dad was pretty mean. Um, he was angry. I know that a lot of my friends were like very scared of him.
Uh-huh.
And I knew my dad as like the hand of punishment. As an adult now, like we have a much better relationship. You wouldn't even think that there is any issue between us because I love my dad so much, but it had to take a lot of growing
Yeah.
as an adult, and so is he. But when we were kids, I knew that my dad was punishment, consequences. So I
Mhm.
equated that with God. God was punishment, God was consequences. People could say that God loves you, and that may be true. Like someone like my dad could say he loved me, and that would maybe be true. But in my
Yeah.
brain, all I'm thinking is God is punishment. Um, and
So
I would
like when
focus on even in the Bible, like in little Bible stories, like all the things that God was angry about,
Mhm.
uh, as opposed to all the great things that happened.
Do you think that that focus affected like how you lived your life or you know with regards to like there's somebody watching over me and is going to punish me but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I put a lot of thought into that as a kid, of course, because
Mhm.
that's a pretty complex thought for
Yeah.
a
I
child.
know.
But
Hmm.
yeah, I think I did grow up with a lot of fear. Um, like not like healthy fear, like fear of the Lord, but like just straight up fear of God in
Yeah. Hmm.
general. So that did follow me a lot through my life. Yeah.
It's a very common thing for people, to compare God to their dad.
Yeah.
I think if you have a dad that's loving, then you don't, God is loving. If you have a dad that's, like you're saying that, punishment, then that's what God is. And if you've never had a dad, then it's just a very hard concept for people to even understand too.
Yeah.
So, like, but you're growing up in this, and like churches, it's just it's life, right?
Yeah. That's your home. That's your world. We were so ingrained in it.
Hmm. Always doing things, always going to cookouts, always going to people's houses and Bible talks.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we were in preschool, there were probably like 4 or 5 other kids in West Cobb, like our friends who were also in the church at the same preschool. So it felt very much like we always did stuff together.
Yeah.
That was the culture. It was just if you had friends, these are all your friends from church.
Yeah.
Like you maybe have one other friend who lives in your neighborhood, but most of your friends are always from church.
Hmm. Yeah. And so was it good in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was. It's definitely a lot of culture, excuse me, to be grow like to grow up into because of how complex and vast the ICOC is.
Hmm.
So I mean, like I remember I have memories of our Congo services. I have memories of Deeper Shade of Soul. I have memories of us. Like I know that a few people have mentioned. I have memories of the hotels we used to go to for
Yeah.
service. And like now, whenever I'm driving through Smyrna around like 285 and I see the Galleria, I'm like, oh yeah, we used to meet at the Galleria a whole bunch. And we used to go to the Waverly where they had all those like small candies and like
Oh
fishing
yeah, the
in the river.
Waverly with the candies.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's a memory right there.
Yeah. So I mean, I've got a lot of memories. I've got a lot of memories of just like making friends with people and once again seeing all the same people almost on a weekly basis
Hmm.
and like having little play dates and stuff. And I have 3 siblings, so maybe we didn't need as many of those, but parents, when you've got 4 kids, you're gonna want to pawn them off on anybody else if you
Of
can.
course.
So
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was telling someone that like for us, it's hard to think of like a single place for our church. Like, a lot of people, it's like, oh, I had this traumatic church experience and there's the church. Like for us,
yeah.
we had all these meetings and all these hotels and conference centers. It was almost like our cathedrals were the hotels, and
Yeah.
like these things, and you were always playing around in them.
And then yeah, I think maybe it was after the letter or like in between, like when we started going to Life University to meet up
Yep.
as a
Uh-huh.
church. And then I think the letter came out while we were there. And then that's when things started getting crazy. I mean, of course, it all got crazy. The letter changed so much.
Yeah. Man, wow. You know, Life University. I remember meeting there a few times. Um, that's funny. Yeah, we never had a place. Never
Yeah.
had a place. I think that like that's something where I think of like positives. You were talking about the friends, and
Yeah.
you were just always around these people, you know?
Yeah.
And for a while it just felt, I don't know if this was like this, but I don't know. I love that I had this community to some
Yeah.
extent. I know in the beginning when I was like a kid and being around all these families and y'all's family and other people's families, it just felt like a community.
Yeah. I think looking back on it now, it's not something I appreciated or could have appreciated because it's
Of
all we
course. Yeah.
um so and obviously being very sheltered and kind of being naive, I assumed that's what everyone else's life was like, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But they were just in different circles and we just didn't know each other, that sort of thing. But of
Mhm.
course that's not the truth. uh
Yeah, I distinctly remember thinking it's just so weird that people didn't do this.
yeah.
Like, what do you mean nobody like does this or other people don't do this? I mean, this just feels like that's what life is,
Right, and then
you
come to
know?
find out we were the weird ones,
Mhm.
so
Man, I love that you mentioned Deeper Shade of Soul. That's another, I mean, those choirs, man.
Yeah, man. I remember I think my parents took my siblings and I to the Roxy for one
Hmm.
of their live recordings. That was intense.
It was. I bet it
Yeah.
was. I remember feeling so happy when I got the live CD. I got to buy it, and it
Oh
said
yeah, my
live at the
parents still have
Roxy.
both of those CDs. I don't think
Yeah.
it came out on cassette, but yeah. I think we still got those CDs somewhere around my parents' house.
Yeah, it was cool for me because it was like I knew, all these bands come through there. And I was like, our choir went there. That's cool.
Yeah.
So like so did you stay through it in the teens? Um
Yeah, I stayed. Oh, sorry to interrupt you. I gotta remember to just like let you
no, it's
finish your
fine. It's
sentences.
fine. I was just gonna
Um,
say, did do you go through with the teens? Did you just, win and all that stuff? Because some people I talked to, like their parents left and they came back and stuff like that. Just
yeah, I mean, I left probably in 2021, so all throughout teens, all throughout campus, even to the singles ministry or young professionals, whatever you want to call it.
mhm.
I was in it, yeah.
And so when were you like thinking like the whole studying the Bible, I want to get baptized, all that stuff? How did that come about?
Yikes. Yeah, so I think that came about because I think when I was 14, I was having some sort of argument with my parents and
Mhm.
basically doing like the moody, angsty teenager of like nobody understands me, that sort of thing. And then I came out to my parents. I came out as gay, and that conversation wasn't nearly as bad as like other horror stories you've heard. My parents like, we still love you, but here's the ultimatum. You need to get baptized because we're assuming, or at least with what, at that time, they didn't have the resources. Like Luke mentioned, they didn't have the resources. The church didn't have the resources, but my parents assumed that would fix me.
Wait,
So
so hold on, just I'm just want to make sure I heard that right. So you had an argument with your parents and you came out.
yeah,
As you were arguing with them. Okay.
yeah, I don't remember what we were talking about, but yeah, that's what happened.
Okay. And so you're 14, you tell your parents that you're gay, and then they decide to baptize you. Or not baptize you, but you need to get baptized. That's gonna fix you.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Did it fix you? No.
Oh man, well,
I don't want to make light of
that's a
that.
question for my therapist. But the answer is
So
clearly
so man, so you go through the studies knowing that you're gay and knowing that like there's no one. I think that's the biggest that there's two things that strike me when people have mentioned about like coming out, and this is one, there was no resources.
yeah,
No one knows what to do, which is scary for the people that want to support you, but also scary for the person because they're like, there's nothing here. And then it's that whole mindset that this one thing's just gonna fix it all,
yeah.
you know?
I mean, it was kind of terrifying because after that conversation I had with my parents, we never talked about it again. It
Okay.
was just kind of like this blanket, this is what you need to do. We love you, but this is what you have to do. So I mean, eventually I I say I want to say I took it seriously, but more of like I had enough fear built up that I was like, cool, I have to do this. So going through the studies, I think, yeah, my brother and I did them at the same time, um, which I don't know, probably wasn't the best idea, but it happened. And I just remember obviously, like for a lot of people, they're wondering whether or not you're serious. They wonder whether or not, like,
Mhm.
you're just doing this because your friends are doing it or
Yep.
because you want the clout, that sort of thing. You want to be important. Um, which I was having a lot of imposter syndrome about. But in my, like, the back of my mind, I was like, this is my only chance. Like, I
Yeah.
have to do this.
Hmm.
Um, so I was always super afraid that, if we get to the next study and I wasn't paying attention enough or I wasn't serious enough that they would stop and I'd be like, crap, that's it. Like, that's it. That's the end. Like, catastrophizing every scenario I could think of.
It
Um,
was it was so hard to show that feeling of showing that you were serious.
Yeah.
That is that was really hard even for me, because I always had this feeling of I better show them that I'm serious or they're not going to believe me.
Yeah.
Making sure I cried at the right times, making sure that there was something that I was saying, it was like the right thing to say. And I can't even begin to imagine what it was like with you having these feelings, of who you are and still trying to get through this to, oh, damn.
Yeah. I mean, I had to shut a lot of myself off for that. Like, I mean, well, it's funny. I just that's what this has been really therapeutic. Is because I'm listening to other people's stories, especially about like you had to go through the cross study and cry, so you knew
Yeah.
that people like so they knew that you felt it. I don't remember whether I cried or not, but I only had to do it once, so that
Yeah.
that
Lucky
was.
you, jerk. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's
I just
just
say
so
that because I think if there's what people are going to think of me is like he's still pissed off that he had to do the cross study 3 times and he's still mad about that. He's
no, man. You're good. It's just ridiculous in general. Um,
but you
that
made it
that
through.
was a
Yeah.
requirement.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of the outward signs, you know. That's what
Yeah.
they were looking for, optics. But you got baptized?
Yeah. I mean, yep, I did. And I thought that they were gonna suss me out. Like I that was the thing. Like when it came to doing the sin study, of course that's intense because you have to write down your whole like freaking list of sins, quote unquote, that
Yeah.
you
Uh-huh.
committed, and then like talk about them to the people who are studying the Bible with you. And I don't know if you had to do this, but when I was getting baptized as a teen, there was also this expectation that we would have to share that list with our parents because if we were to get baptized, your parents aren't just your parents, they're now your brother and sister in Christ. So not only are they like legally obligated to take care of you as parents, but also spiritually obligated to help take care of you. They're going to be your main disciplers, that sort of thing, because you still live in their household.
Wow,
Uh,
they talked to you about that?
yeah,
What a weird thing to think about your parents being your main discipler.
yeah, that's yeah,
Yeah, I never made it. I didn't make it that far in the teens. I got so tired of all the work that I gave up. And then I came back in campus and got baptized. And so I didn't have to show them that I did have to I did have to tell my boss. I worked at Publix then and I had to tell him that I had stole 3 things. That was my repentance in order to do that. And that
oh
was
my
pretty
gosh.
that was pretty weird. But yeah, you made it through. They didn't catch you.
Yeah, I mean, well, it didn't help that I lied through the sin, like,
Sure.
omission,
Hmm.
lie by omission of the sin study. Like, I was never going to tell anyone that I was gay, of course, because one, it wasn't safe, but also two, I was like, if this is supposed to fix me and this is not, like, and this causes me to stop studying the Bible because I just feel irredeemable, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself.
So were you thinking that the baptism was going to take the feelings away at any point?
Yeah. Yeah, I originally thought that the baptism would clear it all up. Like everyone
Uh,
talks about baptism as being this magical moment in their life,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
when they're doing their sharing, they're talking about like the trigger words, like I hit rock bottom, um,
Hmm.
and then they're talking about like what's been happening through the studies and how it's been changing their life, all of that stuff. And I just assumed because of all the baptisms that I've seen in all my life and all the people, my parents were a shepherding couple.
Hmm.
So they had a bunch of new disciples coming over to our house like every Sunday. I remember that vividly. So they would continue like meeting up with with new converts, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And I just remember hearing a bunch of their stories when we weren't like locked away in my parents' room to as kids to not interrupt them. But everyone talking about how magical, like just how incredible the experience of getting baptized was. And
So you,
like
So you thought you were going to come out straight?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that I would maybe come out straight, or at least it would start to change my feelings a bit.
Yeah.
Like it would be a gradual thing. Obviously that wasn't the case. Uh, and it took
Yeah.
me almost a decade after that to realize it, but you
So
know.
so your brother was doing it at the same time. So did you
Mm.
like have the studies like were you sitting next to him during these things or was it separate?
Yeah, for the first, like I want to say for the first 2 to 3, maybe 4 studies, we did them together, and then the further we got in, we had to do them separately, of
Yeah,
course.
sure.
So yeah, I think the no 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 yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I know that at a point, because neither of us were willing um to confess to our parents during the sin study. I think we took a few months off
Oh,
uh,
wow.
until we were ready to do that and have that conversation. Because of course, if we didn't do that, we weren't serious enough. That was,
So you confessed to your parents all your sins?
not all of them,
I
but
mean, of course. No,
yeah.
yeah. You made sure, yeah. Smart.
But
Smart.
yeah, I mean, but some of them, and it's stuff like I feel like there's a decent amount of it my parents already knew. Like, I'm living in their house. It's not like I'm really much that I can hide to them.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I can tell them that I'm cursing at school, but like, you know,
They probably
I
heard you.
stopped doing that kind
Mhm.
of thing, you know. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, the whole sin part was tough because when you're doing it as a kid, it's like, what have you really experienced?
exactly.
Not many of us have experienced that much stuff. Um, I remember one of the worst studies I had was because I confessed that I got in an argument with my mom over some shoes. And I end up crying in that study because of how bad they made me feel because I argued with my mom over shoes.
Oh my
But it's
God.
like, that's the worst thing we did back then, you know? We were so shut away from everything. It was, we weren't exposed to things.
They made you feel like an awful person over
Yep.
shoes.
Yeah,
Not surprised. I'm not surprised.
because my mom got me these shoes and they turned out to not be the ones. And I'm like 15. So of course I'm gonna react.
Yeah.
So but yeah, that was tough. I can't believe you had to confess that to your parents, man. Just it makes me feel so weird.
Yeah. Super uncomfortable. But it all worked out. I got baptized. So yeah, but I mean, I came out of the water. I think we were in a hotel like right near the airport.
Hmm.
Um, that's where we were meeting. And I came out of the water, and immediately my first thought was, I am exhausted and I want to go home and not be around people. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that that was mental health issues, but at the time, everyone's like, "Are you so excited? Like, like, aren't you like, don't you feel amazing?" And I'm like, I don't want to talk to or see another person for like a good 24 hours. I want to go home and take a nap. I have school tomorrow. Like, I'm
And
finished.
because it was a spectacle. So of course you're in the front. Of course there's the big talk. You're in the front of everybody at church,
Yeah.
right? And then there's probably the big because whenever it was like a dad and a kid, it was always more clapping and so much energy. They were so psyched about that.
Yeah.
I,
Well, I mean, because my brother and I got baptized on the same day, they waited
oh
until after
man.
service,
Uh-huh.
for like people to come around the pool, that sort of thing. So it wasn't like we're holding up the line on the service kind of deal.
Talk about like just like the only thing I can come up is just like this is gonna sound really, but like Christian porn, like theatrics. It's just this idea of like we've got two sons on the same day getting baptized.
No, that's wank bait for them. I'm telling
Yes.
you.
They're just like, yes, yes. People's heads are exploding in the back. They're like, I could just, and I don't want to make some people were so psyched because they were feeling, they were just so pure hearted about it all, but it was just
Yeah.
such a big thing. Oh, man.
I mean, it truly was a spectacle. I think
Hmm.
some of I mean, and I don't even want to rank them. It feels terrible, but some of the best baptisms I've been to or been included in were very intimate. Just
Hmm.
a small group of people. It didn't need to be like this, oh, hey, we got like we have to get them in front of the campus ministry. We have to get them in front of the church. It's like, yeah, we did it in a creek at like 2 a.m. Or, we did it in someone's pool and there was maybe like 10 people there.
Hmm.
Uh, that's when it felt like, okay, this is an actual, someone's having an actual personal relationship with God and not like the entire congregation having to watch you go through this very intense um like intense marriage covenant with
Yeah.
God and have everyone around like kind of like it would be a wedding. Like that on you don't need that, especially when it comes to declaring your utmost like love and loyalty to God and to Jesus and like and it being about your salvation, you know?
Hmm.
That maybe you want to share that with people, but that's so intense to do
Yeah.
in front of like a group of a few hundred to like 1,000 folks. That's oof.
Yeah, I think as much as I think the church needed it to be a spectacle, that's what gets people psyched about doing this and
Yeah.
being a part of it. People needed it to feel that encouragement. They're probably, you're seeing people doing the same thing you did. It takes them back to that moment. Um, but every church that I've been to so many churches outside of our church. It's always like that. It
Yeah.
has to be. It almost like it has to be a spectacle.
Right.
A lot of times now, you get baptized in a special T-shirt behind a backdrop.
Oh
That's
no.
something now that people do, and it's
The
like,
lights have to be blue. It's all mood lighting. Yeah.
huh, yep. The lights come down. The worship team has a great song that they're about to, kick on, and it's. I wish that it was moving for me, but maybe it would be like for you, it's just not. It doesn't move me like at all. I see all of the other things.
Yeah. I think it depended for me because there is a part of it I'm like, this is a celebration of a new life.
Sure.
That is incredible.
Hmm.
But to think about how intimate it is in front of a whole group of people, like I know that they needed that. I know that that was meant to be a celebration as a family. That is the context of the church, of the
Yeah.
body,
Hmm.
whatever you have. But excuse me, sometimes I feel like there are things that are okay not being as not being as advertised, not being so heavily marketed
Yeah.
in front of the church because this is about your personal relationship with God. Like
Hmm.
that is always going to be intimate. Well, hopefully it's always going to be intimate. But the culture that we have, the further we get into it, it's not about you and God. It's about you and this group of people. And
Yeah.
hopefully you're somehow meeting in the middle with God.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I think about, like, whenever I think of the most powerful times of me with anything spiritual or God, it's always been the intimate ones.
Yeah.
It rarely ever has it been even in a church service,
Like the
It's
Starlight Devos at camp.
hmm.
Like
Oh.
those are always so great because yeah, like we're sitting there and like, Jeff is probably giving us a little bit of a sermon, a lesson. People are praying, we're singing, but it is just like you can shut all that out and just look at the stars and be with God in a field. And that's we need
Hmm.
more of that.
Man, it's so funny that you said Jeff, because when I said Starlight Devo, I think Sunny, and
Oh,
now
you're
there's and
right.
now and now there's a Steve, and so it's like it's so wild to think of that. But yeah, those Starlight Devos, when you're sitting in the field just looking up at stars, and Sunny used to talk about if you got into a golf cart and drive to the different planets, how long it would take.
Yeah.
He used to say things like that. Or we watched did they watch the video Indescribable, where it had that preacher talk about if the earth was the size of a golf ball?
Yeah, I am familiar with that one, so maybe we did it. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That was always, it just blows your mind. And there's no one around, you know? It's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. Even the singing devos,
Out in the
another in.
woods. Yeah, man. Like it was like, yeah, because it was an optional thing. You had to wake up early enough to get to it. But when
Yeah.
you're there, it's so intimate. It's small. You don't have to worry about other people around you. I mean, you're going to be self-conscious. We're teens, you know.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it's a special experience being around less people doing something where you are actively connecting with God
Mhm.
in a sense by yourself.
Yeah. I'm really great I'm always grateful for the camp for that we had those moments. It kind of took a little bit of the sting away
Yeah.
to have a place that was in the woods, that was away. It was a bubble, you know. But but yeah, the intimate times are the most powerful ones.
Yeah.
So so you get baptized, you're in the teens. I mean, what was that like? Knowing that you're one way. I mean, and then
Right.
trying to be what you think you're supposed to be.
Um, I mean, it was difficult, but I have really bad habits like most people do of shoving your emotions away. And, in high school, with high school being so intense, I was um in like the gifted AP classes trying to overachieve. I was in marching band full time, so that's where my focus was.
What'd you
I didn't
play?
have to I played clarinet. I played oboe in, like in concert band, but I played clarinet when I was marching because, if I
Oh,
broke my reed on the oboe, I'd probably die.
yeah,
Uh,
of course.
so
Yeah, I played the alto sax in the marching band.
nice.
Yep.
Woodwind family, man.
Shout out to the marching band. Best times of my life. I don't care what people say.
Yeah, I mean, it was also kind of like a family, really close knit. We,
Hmm.
we're meeting, gosh, like three times a week after school, and then we got football games on Friday nights. Um, and then, we're doing competitions as well. So we had a competition band too. So competitions would happen on Saturday, or we'd have like rehearsal for a competition on a Saturday, and then the next week we would go. Um, and it was a major time commitment.
Oh,
Um,
yes, it was. Oh, yeah.
to the point where my teen leader,
Hmm.
my teen leader, basically, I don't know if I want to call it an accusation, but basically it was like, it feels like you're making marching band your god. And I was like, this is an extracurricular that I'm committed to, dude. Like you wouldn't say
Yeah.
this to your like football trophy dudes, because that's also a huge commitment for them. So
Oh, you're striking a nerve with me. Oh,
yeah,
you're hitting. Yeah. Of course. They're not going to tell the football players that or, you know, oof,
because they
oof.
can lift the football players up in front of the church and be like, "Yo, look at what God did. He like helped them to win all throughout the season or through this championship." And I'm like, "Yeah, my band won at like at a Southeast conference in first place for a few things." And they're like, no one cares. They're not going to ask about like,
That's always so hard watching those kids get lifted up like that, you know?
yeah,
It showed that like for me sometimes I never wanted to say it, but it showed me that the church was just like the world, you
yeah,
know? Oh man, but band was tough. You were doing all those things, trying to remember, trying to play the music, trying to remember the steps, trying to do all that
right,
stuff. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's a sport. It was athletic, but it's also very mind engaging.
mhm,
And that's why there was so much commitment because you had to
yeah.
be like, you've got like 100 other people also relying on you to make something beautiful. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, it is super obvious.
Oh yeah. I I tripped one time at a show.
Ooh,
I was wearing I was wearing Jinko jeans. It was a rehearsal. It wasn't a show, but I was wearing my Jinko jeans and I put my foot in one of the legs and it just I ate. Luckily I didn't land on my instrument, but that was it was bad. Yeah.
It's even crazy to think about like, oh God, I fell, but at least I saved my instrument.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, I may be soaking wet from the rain, but at least I saved my pads
Yeah,
on
I know.
clarinet so they don't have to get replaced because that's so much money.
So so did you say that to the team leader? Like, would you say this to the football guy or just in your head that's what you thought?
That's what I would say in my head
Yeah.
because obviously it's ingrained in you that you're not supposed to talk back. You're not supposed to question things. You're supposed to, like, as a disciple, you're supposed to be a yes man.
Of course. Yep.
Um,
So did you stop or were you just like, I mean, I don't know what you wanted to, I don't know what you want me to do.
no, I mean, I kept going. I was like,
Good.
I like, there's a possibility I'm going to go to college for music. Like, I'm in this band. I'm in marching band, but I also have concert band and I'm in choir. So, like, I'm good at music. This is my gift. This is my talent. I didn't put it as much work as I possibly could for this, just for someone to say, well, you're not honoring God with that, or like it's taking too much of your time away.
Hmm.
Um, what do you mean I can't be honoring God with this? I'm putting a lot of my time and focus into making something great, working as hard as I can. Like, how is that not glorifying to God, you know? And
Hmm.
using him as my strength instead of being like, yeah, I mean, well, no, I was always exhausted. It was just a bad time, but also trying to attribute what I have to God. Like, how is how are you going to say that that is me putting something that God is helping me doing over him, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, it didn't stop because I was like, I'm 3 years into this, and this is my like I'm going into my senior year to do this.
And
I'm not about to drop it because you think that I'm making this my God, you
and
know?
I assume your parents were supportive of you being in marching band and doing
Yeah,
this and all of that.
yeah,
Um, because probably someone talked to them about it, or maybe they did. Generally, that's what would happen.
yeah. I'm not sure, to be honest. I
Hmm.
think I think even in my parents' mind, it was, this is a part of the thing that the church teaches you that's just really negative. One a part of like the shame
Hmm.
of anything that you do um could be wrong. A big thing with my parents is like idle hands fall into sin. So, we had to be occupied. I had to be productive all the time.
Really?
Some of that came from my insecurities because I felt like if I wasn't overachieving, then I had no value in my family because I
Mm,
was gay. But also, it just kind of felt like this is, if I can commit myself to something, that keeps me out of trouble,
yeah.
or it shows other people that it's always when you're in high school, it's always about getting to college. I don't want to go to
Yeah.
college, but I had to. So it's like this looks better. Like, I'm taking all these classes, busting my butt, maybe not getting the best grades, but still trying. And I'm also in like this heavy commitment activity. That looks great for colleges, or at least it should. It used to.
Yeah.
Um, so that's, they were supportive of that, but I think there was always the twinge in there of you need to be doing something. We don't
Mm.
just want you coming home every day and doing nothing, like saying you're going to get your homework done and then watching TV, that sort of thing. Um, so I mean, yeah, that was in high school. The only days that I wasn't doing marching band stuff, maybe except for the occasional Saturday, was when we had church. So
Hmm.
I was occupied.
Yeah, I know that like for us, there were things that I couldn't do if it um happened to be on it would happen to be on a day that we would be meeting for church. I mean, I wasn't a big sports guy at all, but I can remember like not being on a soccer team because of we would meet on the practices would be on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And so my parents were like, we're not going to do that. You're going to miss church, or church came first.
Remember having to tell my team leader that, let him know that I was not going to be at church on Sunday because I had a competition. Crazy to think that I needed to answer to like a 23-year-old
Hmm.
when I'm like 17 and be like, yeah, just so you know, I'm not slacking off. I'm not in sin. I have a prior commitment that I have to be at. Like it's insane, right?
Because the first thing people think of if you're not there is not like, is he okay? It's like, he's off sinning and doing something,
Right.
you know?
And it doesn't and it didn't hurt or help that I have a twin brother. So it's like if one of us wasn't there, everyone would be asking, like, where's your brother? Why isn't he here? And it wasn't the default of asking like, is he okay? Is he sick? That kind of thing. It was just like, well, why isn't he
Yeah.
here?
Man. Oh, yeah, it's rough. Yeah, how did you had to tell a 22-year-old man you weren't at church? You just have to answer. We had to answer to so many people.
I know.
I'm sorry. Like someone was always keeping tabs on you. Someone always was like, I'm lucky that I didn't live in a household when I was in campus because I couldn't afford it. So I was with my parents, but phone calls, checking up on you, talking with, I mean, it was like that in the teens, you know,
Constant surveillance.
constant surveillance.
I mean, and luckily, because we were in West Cobb, there weren't other disciples at our schools. So it was kind of like a, yeah, I feel separated because all of my friends go to like Walton or Kennesaw Mountain,
Hmm.
but also not, I don't have someone breathing down my neck every day at school.
So
Yeah,
that
that's
kind of was, that might have been nice.
yeah. And then of course it all changed when we got to campus. Uh,
Yeah. I felt the opposite of like, I wanted to be at a school that everyone went to. Because, we were at Campbell. So nobody went there,
yeah.
and so I was always just wishing that I would see people so that I felt included on something. But I mean, I get why you would want that little bit of respite. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would have been nice to have more disciple friends there, people that I would see on a regular basis, but
mhm.
I spent most of my life not having those people going to my school as
Yeah.
well.
Mm.
So, it wasn't like I didn't feel like I was lacking anything because of the norm.
Yeah. Did you, was there anyone that you were able to confide in, like outside of church about being
Yeah.
gay? Of
I mean, marching band in general is just full of a lot of freaks.
course, they are.
So
Yes.
you could be pretty honest with your close-knit group of friends there, and that's what I was. It was a lot of it was difficult for me at the same time because I don't, like I'm trying to figure out who I am as a teenager. That's not an easy process. So I don't know how to label myself. I don't know what is true, what isn't. I'm going like all these hormones going on in my body. And
Hmm.
then my brain is always occupied on like, you have to go to school, you need to excel, you have to do this. So I was, I guess, out per se to some of with my friends, but at the same time, you also have an entire school of other people around you with this whole
Hmm.
caste system. Um, and you can't let people know you're gay because that's not safe. You don't want to
Especially
get
back
bullied.
then.
Yeah.
Especially back then, it wasn't safe.
Even if like it's obvious that you are,
You just
you
don't.
don't say it out loud because you don't want you don't want to get bullied. You don't want to get ostracized. Even with the smart folks, you don't want that to happen because some of those smart folks happen to be cool and like walk in different circles, that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, it was. I had a small group of friends that I was honest and confided with, but I don't know that that was really what I needed.
Hmm.
Um, because yeah, I see these people at school every day for a certain number of hours, but they're not like because they're not a part of the church, because they're not a part of the ICOC, they're not a part of my home. They're not a part of
Yeah.
my family, quote unquote. Uh, so yeah, I mean, yeah, it was maybe a small hand group, like small group of friends, like maybe 5 people. Um, but really, really, I get, yeah, I just reiterate that of like it wasn't what I needed to um to like really help myself in
Hmm.
that time period.
What do you think you would have? What do you think you needed, or what do you think it would have been helpful
Yeah, like
besides the obvious, just being able to be yourself and like have someone to talk to and not be
yeah.
afraid
Well,
of.
I mean, no, I've done this in therapy, EMDR, where you're basically going back and like talking to yourself through a memory and trying to change
I've
your
done that too.
Uh, it's super helpful.
It is,
Really,
man. It really
really
is.
awkward, but
Hmm.
really helpful.
Sorry to
Um,
interrupt you. It's just
no.
cool to hear someone that's done the same thing I've done in therapy.
Yeah, I mean, look, here I am. I'm gonna do a shameless plug because I feel like everybody kind of does, but I want to reiterate for anyone who's listening, whether you've left the ICOC, whether you're still a part of it, don't scoff at therapy. It is so, so, so helpful. You don't, and you're probably not even aware of what it is you need out of
Mhm.
therapy, but I can tell you, being in this church, being in this group of churches, you're repressing more than you think you are.
Mhm.
Um, and once you get out of the church, you got to take time. You got to take time to heal that. Like, I just recently started going into religious trauma, like the religious trauma of my therapy sessions. Um, and it's tough. Like you don't realize because of how much this was a part of our lives, how much this bleeds into other issues
Mhm.
that we have as human beings. I will say, like, there are a lot of resources out there. People just, you have to be diligent in looking for them. Not every therapist is going to be like the one. You might have to shop around a little bit. Um, but if you're still in the ICOC and you want to see a therapist, there are a lot of spiritual therapists out there. I would say one caveat, do not go see a therapist who is a part of the ICOC or in your congregation.
Yeah.
You need someone who does not know you, does not know anything about our culture, and can objectively look at you as a human being and be like, you have a
Mhm.
mental illness. This is what we need to do to help you. Or, obviously, if you don't want to call it a mental illness, if you're not ready for that, but at least someone you can talk to that doesn't know you and doesn't know our culture, so they can't they the the darkness, the dark tendrils that are like that had the roots that are still a part of the church can't weave their way into the healing that you need.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you said it. It had the therapist, you need an objective eye.
Yeah.
You need someone who's not a part of what it is. I mean, anybody needs therapy. I've said it hundreds of times on this podcast that it doesn't matter if you're a father, a man, whatever. It just therapy. You need to talk about your stuff. You don't get out of life clean.
No.
You don't get out of life like unscathed. I mean, it's hard, and you have things that create these perpetual cycles in in your brain and in your life that keep you in a space that can be very unhealthy. So get to the root cause of it,
Yeah.
you know?
I'm gonna say a strong opinion here, but if you think you're normal, you're not.
Yeah. Nobody, come on.
Like humble out, bro.
Oh, don't
Check
say,
your
oh,
heart.
humble trigger word. Jeez. Oh, you're not being humble enough. But yeah, no, yeah. No. What is normal, you know?
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't. So you make it out of high school,
Yeah.
um,
Um,
and you're still in the church, and you go to campus. Did you stay in state or did you go somewhere else?
I stayed in state.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of slipped a little bit with my grades in senior year. So
Mhm.
I ended up getting into Georgia State. Um, I My parents were really adamant about me going to Kennesaw because it was closer, but also that's where most of the disciples were.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was like basically kind of like an easier place, a safer place in their opinion, but also someone could be checking up on me at all times, that
Mhm.
sort of thing. But I'm glad I went to Georgia State. We had a smaller group, smaller ministry. I think there were maybe about 12 of us there at the school. Um, and it educates you a lot because of course you're being in a smaller group, but you have to rely on this small group of people
Mhm.
to kind of help meet your spiritual needs, but also take care of you as like learning how to be an adult. As an 18-year-old, if I didn't have my GSU family, I would have been so lost.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so I mean, Yeah, I was at Georgia State. We at the time, I think we had basically split north and south like you guys were, just for convenience, that sort of thing. But we also weren't the only ICOC campus ministry at Georgia State.
There were more than one?
Yeah. So I mean, you had us, and like I know we mentioned that like they're they're bridge they're called Bridgepoint now, I think, but they're the ones who are like not even a mile down the road from North River. Um,
Yeah.
they had campus folks there, and then Greater Atlanta, like the arts ministry that was in downtown Atlanta, there was also a group of them. Um,
But guys didn't meet together.
no,
That's interesting.
we it was it got real sus there because I think there was one point in time, maybe when I was a freshman or maybe when I was a sophomore, when I guess there were some issues between leadership in the churches, and we were basically told that we could not we could not do Bible talks with the Greater Atlanta Church or their campus
Whoa.
ministry. We couldn't go to their Bible talks. We probably shouldn't share our faith together, but we still did. Um, and it was above our pay grade. It was kind of like, this is ridiculous. This doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, but we couldn't question it. It's just like this is what came down from leadership. Kind of like what's
Things did get weird for a few years there with regards to like, because how the churches fell, like when the dust settled,
yeah.
it got very like tribal, um, very like, I mean, it very separate. I mean, they said that it was like a brotherhood, but it was very separate with how they dealt with things,
It
you know?
was it was a step over being a majorly dysfunctional family,
Mhm,
but the kind that has enough wine in it to where they're like, okay, I can get through this, that sort of
mhm.
thing. Um,
Yeah, that's gotta be crazy to navigate. You're like, I mean, they're, jeez.
and then it didn't help that there was another campus ministry, not a part of our churches. They were called Campus Crusade, and they were going around telling people that we were a cult, so they
Yep.
could poach other people who were coming to church with us away from us. And that obviously when I was really in it, super ingrained, like ride
Mhm.
or die for the ICOC and campus ministry. I was like, how dare like
How dare you?
just so
Yeah.
indignant. How dare they call us a cult? Like we're all trying to follow the same God, I think. Um,
It's just so funny how we were all so indignant about it and like, no, you guys are wrong. You guys are so wrong about all of this. It's
look
never
where
like
they
a
are
question
now.
of like, why are they saying this?
Right.
It's just like this is persecution and they were persecuted and
Ugh.
I'm being persecuted. And so this means we're doing something right. I know.
We as
Um,
a church wanted to be oppressed so bad.
people in Christianity love to be oppressed. People in Christianity love to feel like they are the minority and they're being persecuted because of their beliefs and that everyone is out to get them. We
Look,
I say we is just like in a general sense, but we loved it. We love it.
yeah.
I mean, they love to talk about how persecuted they are because they don't believe that men can get married and then all of those things or something as simple as that or like their outlook on baptism and someone disagrees with them, they're just like, geez,
Yeah.
they're like, yes though, but like, yes, I've been persecuted.
And I'm telling you, as like a brown and gay man, that's not something that anyone wants.
Yeah.
Like you're not looking to like validate yourself. Like, yeah, I got called the N-word today, or I got called an abomination. I'm doing great in my life. Like, no, that's not what you should wish for.
That's
You should look at the Bible and see these people being persecuted with some humility, not like they were doing the right thing and that's why all this happened to them. Like I don't think that we're all at the place spiritually where we want to go get like brutally murdered like the apostles did, just so we can say that we got that we overcame persecution, that sort of thing. Like just
yeah.
let's dial it back a whole bunch.
But I mean, we look at these examples of how like the apostles died and we're like, that's how we need to be going out. And that's how we're going to live our lives toward that. And it's like,
Turn my cross upside down.
yep, jeez. Oh man. But so like you get to college though, but you were saying you were ride or die, so like you loved it, you were in it, you were like this is still it, like
I won't say that I loved it, but I was committed.
got it.
Um,
Okay.
because this was another community. This is a larger community that I felt like I would be a part of.
Yeah.
Still in the back of my mind, I thought to myself, this could make me straight. Um, you know, that feeling of a lot of affirmation that I wasn't getting beforehand
Mhm.
because now these people, because we are constantly under surveillance, we had something going on every damn night. Like
Yep.
it's so terrible. Like I don't even want to get into it, but I'm going to. Of like I think maybe I had one night a week. It was probably either Monday or Wednesday where I could just go home and do homework. But
Hmm.
Tuesday was our midweek.
Yep.
Either Monday or Wednesday would be our D groups, which for like those who don't know what that means, is kind of like our accountability groups. Um,
Hmm.
Thursday, I would have worship rehearsal either with the campus worship team or with the main church worship team. Friday, always Devos. Saturdays, dates. Sunday
Yep.
was its own work day. I'm like at the church from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. With
Jeez.
rehearsal services and then Bible talk leaders meetings. Um, and it was just like I felt like I was accomplishing something by doing all of that. The way that people nowadays were just like so proud of being so busy
Hmm.
and being miserable. Um, I think that's kind of the way that I felt. It was like this is a huge affirmation. Like I was very much a works kind of guy, like works over faith as opposed to having equal amounts. I was very much like the more that I do, the more affirmation I can get, but also it is also providing an affirmation for me that like I'm still covered by the blood of Jesus and like I deserve salvation or like I didn't deserve salvation, but like I'm working for my salvation, that sort of thing, because I just felt so terrible about who I was. Um, Growing up hating yourself is is a bitch, I'll tell you that.
Hmm.
Uh,
They were really good at getting us to feel bad about ourselves. So to have your added, level of that has got to be, oh, geez.
I mean, and it was always conflicting because I was being lifted up for my talents.
Hmm.
Eventually, well, I was, always pretty shy, rightfully so, because I didn't want people to know who the real me was. I obviously didn't know who the real me was at that time anyway. But I started being trained up to be the song monkey of the campus ministry, or like we called ourselves song monkeys. It's probably not good because we were all black. So, um, yeah. Um, but yeah, but I was being trained up to be the main song leader. Eventually once, I've had some really great campus ministers and leaders and some really terrible ones, but the ones who poured the most into me were like, we're going to teach you how to be a better song leader. We're going to get you out of your shell, that sort of thing. Um, so I felt like I was being affirmed for my gifts. I was being affirmed for the way that I was serving the church. I remember that we had a campus retreat one time, and I was leading worship. I put a lot of work into like planning out the entire weekend worth of worship.
Wow.
Ooh, gosh. And my campus minister shouldn't have told me this, but he did. Basically during worship, my old team minister, ended up becoming a campus minister. I don't know if he was still um with us or if he was leading at Auburn for a while. He was like, "When did Jon Weaver get a personality?" And when I heard that, I was like, "You asshole!" Like,
Dang, that sucks.
it's cool though. People are dicks.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it felt good to be affirmed for the hard work that I was putting
Hmm.
in. Even though I hated myself throughout it.
Hmm. Yeah, the church did really well at that. Like, try or not. I mean, they would be affirming the work that you were doing if it was providing something,
Right.
and then you would get a spotlight on. And I think that's one thing that's kind of like a tenet of our church was the works. You
Yeah.
know, the works that you were doing is how it was the works that you were doing and how you looked.
Yeah.
I think were two things that were like determinants of like your salvation.
Mm.
Um, and it it's tough when you, I guess, I mean, for me, I never saw myself in the people that were up high. And so I don't know, I just never felt that I was going to attain that. But these, it's just so opposite though of what the whole thing is supposed to be about, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, it didn't help that in my heart, I was a very ambitious person, and that's what they wanted. They want
Hmm.
a type A, they want someone charismatic, they want someone who's going to fight for what it is that they want, because that'll help them to grow into, well, I mean, grow, I'm going to use that term loosely, but it'll help them to shine. They
Hmm.
wanted people who were shiny, or like, I guess, I know my mom used this word right after I told her about the podcast. She was like, she used the word sharp, and I was like, oh my God, it's a huge trigger for Roy.
She
Um,
called me sharp.
no, she used the term sharp.
Oh God, I was like, oh,
Um,
don't call me
it's like
sharp,
she was
please.
like, that's what they wanted. They wanted sharp people.
Yeah.
And now I don't remember like what other, because I don't remember us using sharp when I was in campus. It was more of like um solid, on fire, awesome, that sort of thing.
Shall say sold out,
I think we said locked in instead.
locked in.
Yeah. Uh yeah. But that's what they were looking for. You had to have the personality, you had to have the looks. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I think I don't know which came first, having a little bit of a glow up or having the personality glow up that kind of got me on their radar, because I was getting out of my shell and because I was talented. But they pounced on that. They're like, "Oh, you have potential." Some of it was kind of like a what's the word? A necessity, because
Hmm.
I was the only freshman to come into Georgia State my year. So they were like, "Hey, we've got our two leaders at Georgia State. They're about to be on their way out, so we need to train you up because you're the only one we have this year." To be like a Bible talk leader. And of course, I didn't want to do that, but I couldn't say no. You can never say no.
Yeah, can't say no.
Say no.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, once again, it does give you that kind of affirmation of like, oh, maybe I am pretty. Okay. Um, maybe I do have a bearable personality. Uh, like it makes you feel wanted.
Yeah.
But you're being used.
Hmm.
I mean, and I guess it's sadly enough, it's a maybe it's a good transaction there. Like, hey, I get lifted up, but I have to do all this work, and people are taking advantage of my gifts, but that's what we would call a job.
Hmm.
Except we weren't getting paid for it. We were getting, well, I mean, maybe we were getting paid in spiritual credits, and that's what I thought of my life is like. Is the more that I can do, um, the more that I can serve, those are my spiritual credits. Like those are my gold coins to get me over the river Styx to get into Elysium, that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah. He'll have a bigger house in heaven or something. I don't know.
right. That or just kind of like I in my brain, I was like, I have a place in heaven at all.
Yep.
Like everything I did was building up another brick, uh, or like another grain of sand, who knows?
That's so much work, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and even looking back on it now, I'm like flabbergasted that that was my mindset because I don't have a great understanding of what heaven looks like. I don't have a great understanding. I mean, like I have vivid pictures of what hell looks like, but I don't have that connection to the joy of heaven that everyone really talks about, or the idea of how perfect it could be just serving God all day and night long, and how there's no pain, that kind of thing. I'm like, there's always pain.
Hmm.
Hell is here. That's what it is for me. So I know it could get worse, but I can't see how it could get better. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I really hated myself back then. It was not,
Yeah.
it was not good. Uh, uh, yeah.
Well, well, what was it like to date then in the church?
Oh, Roy.
I mean, I can't. I mean, I hated it, and I can't imagine what.
The culture is so messed up, man.
But
Uh,
just the idea, like, you're on these dates with these girls, and you're feeling your feelings because you know who you are, and
yeah. I mean, I had an entire therapy session dedicated to just venting about this, not even to getting into the healing part of it, just venting.
Hmm.
because our culture is so screwed up. Like the moment you hear we're splitting up men and women in anything, you knew we were talking about purity or
Yep.
dates.
Hmm.
Which would always like I would die inside because we'd have to have like I don't know, it was just always so intense. Um,
Yeah.
we-
Hmm.
some some older man, like a married man from within the church, come in and yell at us and say that we were boys and not men, and that we need to do a better job of taking our sisters out on dates, be better examples. Excuse me, that sort of thing. Um, I thought it was hilarious when you said that they were telling you that if you masturbated, you were gay.
Yeah.
Uh, because for me, if I'd heard that, I would have been like, internally, I would have been like, hell yeah, I'm already ahead of the class. You guys are losers. Um, but obviously, up
Yeah.
to like when I was in campus, we had that like that wouldn't have flown, and we had a campus minister when I first started who was very adamant about that not being okay. Uh,
Hmm.
like not to make a joke out of being gay, which is actually really like to a point affirming for me, but is obviously just kind of like a we say it once, we're not going to say it again sort of thing. Um, but yeah, when it came to dates, it was always so nerve-wracking. I understood the concept of it being encouraging, like calling them encouragement dates obviously is just really triggering, but the fact that like, yeah, we're taking our sisters out, we're taking a girl out just so she can have a good time. And she can see what it's like having um like going on a date with someone, whether it's under a romantic interest or not, which it never was for me. Um, just showing how they should be treated, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And that aspect of it I was okay with. I mean, I'm a heavy introvert, so if I didn't have to be around people or talk to anyone, especially being gay, I'd be like, cool. If I can get out of going on this double, I'm great. Um, but yeah, it just it just got super weird. I think that was probably one of the bigger things that started like waving a red flag for me was that this was our expectation of how to have healthy relationships with the opposite sex,
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
opposed to like, you know, it's so sad that we're basically under the impression that we're all so socially inept that we can't have a conversation, a one-on-one conversation with a woman, without it either being looked at as sinful or a weasel date. Uh,
Hmm.
I hated that term so much because I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, like I'm on a weasel date because I'm having a civil conversation with a woman that is not turning towards something sexual or having the ulterior motive of something sinful. But I mean, I'm gay, so it wasn't going to turn that way anyway. But it just felt so dumb
Yeah.
that we couldn't expect the trust or even the capacity for men to have a conversation with a woman one on one and there
Hmm.
not be anything wrong with it.
Yeah. Jeez.
And then it all flowed into the dates, and that even got complicated too. I think the biggest thing that really, I mean, I was always not comfortable with it, but the biggest thing that turned me off to that idea was the first time I heard that the sisters couldn't say no to dates. that
Mm.
was
Yeah.
that scared me. I was like, what do you mean they can't say no? Like you're
Hmm.
saying basically the message that you're sending to both men and women is that anyone outside of the church is either like a pervert or like a Jezebel, and they're always coming to steal your innocence. Um, but our women can't say no to going on dates with us,
Hmm.
taking away a form of autonomy that would probably look really, really bad outside of this church. Like if a man came up to a woman and was like, "I want you to go, or do you want to go on a date with me?" And she says no, this is the equivalent of him like, I mean, this is a stretch, I'll say that, but it's the equivalent of him like going off and being like, well, if you don't go on a date with me, then you know I'm gonna attack you. Like we weren't a step towards that level, but it felt like the path was open that we're telling
Hmm.
them they can't say no
Yeah. It
going
was
on a
that
date.
idea of their job was to encourage us as much as we were supposed to encourage them. Like, and I'm not using that. That's what it was. They were there
Yeah.
for us and we were there for them. and that's just how it is. It's not right because that's not at all what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah.
Getting to know someone and dating someone should never be like that. The purpose of it is, I mean, it's an incredibly flawed and damaging system
Yeah.
that we were put into, and it puts nothing but pressure on both parties. Pressure to your and fear of everything, fear of every
Yeah.
movement, fear of every placement of your hand and not even in like a, I mean, just like where, if you're at watching a movie, is your arm too close to theirs?
Yeah.
No, because what is that going to do? What is that going to say to them? And like the fear of being alone with someone.
Yeah, I mean the culture. I mean, it varies from place to place, but like I remember obviously what we called midnight was what we called sin hour.
Oh yeah, the sin hour.
Never be like, even if you were in a group, men and women could never be together after midnight. My brother lived in Kansas when I was in campus, so I would visit him during holiday weekends if I could. I remember just being like internally so scandalized that we were at a sister's place. I mean, they lived in the same neighborhood as my brother and his roommate, so it wasn't that weird, I guess. But we were at a sister's place watching a movie. I think it was A Great Gatsby, and it was after midnight, and no one was getting up. No one was moving. We just stayed to watch the movie, and I was like, wait, is someone going to tell on us? Is someone here like a plant and they're going to go tell the campus minister and we're all going to have a talking to? Or I'm going to
Yeah.
go back to Atlanta and that campus minister will have talked to my campus minister
Hmm.
and said that this happened, because that's how it worked. You
Yeah.
could not, like, eyes were always on you. You couldn't get away with anything, or well, get away is a loose term because it was, excuse, excuse me, it was always a matter of perception, right?
And it
So,
wasn't like most of anybody was doing anything. It was just like you're watching a movie and it's over at 12:30 or 1 o'clock, whatever.
right.
Yeah, it's that's something that's hard to let go of. It's hard to reconcile and heal um from all of cheese.
Yeah.
I remember going on single dates and feeling like I was such a rebel, you know. I was already like, I mean, I was in my mid 20s, but it's still just like you're just this constant like, what are you saying? How are you saying it? Are you making her feel encouraged? Are you making her feel comfortable?
Yeah.
So much is going on. Jeez. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to lose yourself in that, especially when the date isn't necessarily about encouragement, when you're actually interested in someone.
Mhm.
I remember that being its own issue, uh, because you'd have some guys who got baptized, so they're like, I saw this really pretty girl, and the only way that she's going to date me is if I get baptized. Obviously, their hearts were changing because they were going through this the uh the studies, so that was great, but like that was for a lot of people, that was their focus, was I'm going to get into campus and I got to get married before I get out. Or
Mhm.
if I'm interested in someone, I don't want to wait another day. I don't want to wait for another brother to pounce on them. We had an issue where we called them waves, where it's like a handful of brothers would be interested in the same sister, and they're all unknowingly fighting over trying to win her affections, to the point where everyone's trying to take this sister on a date, but other sisters haven't been taken on dates in weeks or months. So we would get called out for that too.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah,
There's always one or two girls that all the guys liked.
yeah. And then I don't know, the sadness and dejection that they would feel when their feelings weren't reciprocated, or when she actually started officially dating someone else and they're like, I thought things were going well. Like, because of course the a part of our culture is you could never outright tell someone you're interested in them. Um,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
could be kind of, it could be subtle, it could be kind of overt depending on how much time you're spending with them and going on dates, but you could never specifically say, oh, I'm into you.
Mhm.
You had to tell your discipler first, and then they would give you advice about how you should proceed, how many dates you should go on within the
Mhm.
next period of like 3 to 4 months.
Then
uh,
then you would sign the appropriate documentation, get them notarized and copied, and then as soon as those were done, they would give them to your leader, and then they would go to the next higher up to make sure all the boxes were checked, and then you
And then
know.
you had to switch over to the women,
Yep.
and then like
Hmm.
tell her discipler that you were interested in her, and then she would give you advice, and you know, she would plant seeds or let you know whether or not she thought it was a good idea. That it just it's like this super gross version of matchmaking where
Yeah.
you like
It's toxic for one thing,
yeah,
and it's very controlling. Um, and I think about all the people that have been divorced that went through that, you know,
yeah,
and it's just dating's just not, it's supposed to be a lot more easy and fun than that.
yeah,
You know, I don't mean easy in like a sexual way. It's just supposed to be easier. You're just getting to know each other.
yeah,
Doesn't need to be all of this pressure. And like you can just be a decent person. And I was telling someone about how this feeling of I've talked about not getting cookies before
yeah,
after the date. And there's always this sense of like you were supposed to get something after the date. It was like a thank you or a
right,
card. And I think what that built in me is this feeling of I need a reward for doing something good.
right, yeah,
And I think that and this touches into bigger things with like I think how boys are in general, how moms can treat boys
mhm,
by, they don't believe that boys can be good, so they have to give them constant rewards and validation in order to do good things. But it's like, why did we even need to have a thank you? Like we needed a cookie because we were just decent.
yeah.
It just does like that doesn't compute with me, you know?
Like it was the bar so low,
Yeah.
we had to like
We're that messed up that the only way to get me to not have sex with you is to know that there's going to be a plate of cookies and a nice handmade card.
thanks for the date. Do you want a cookie? Like
Yeah,
pat on the
like
head and a
you did
cookie.
a great job. You were a good man.
Congrats.
You made it.
Everyone cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that culture was so toxic to the point where I thought that it was that it could work for me, you know? Like there was a sister that I was really close friends with, and obviously I never had any feelings of romance before. Obviously, I've had crushes and stuff, but the more time we spent together, I was like, oh, maybe this is becoming something.
Hmm.
Uh, maybe if we go on more dates, this could be a thing. And it didn't help that, I don't know if you've heard about Guy Hammond. Um, he he is a formerly gay man who got married, had kids within the church, and that became his whole ministry. Um,
Was he became a speaker?
yeah,
Yeah. He came to places.
yeah.
I've heard him. Yeah. Hmm.
So I mean, he came to North River and did a few like classes and stuff, and it was in my brain it was kind of helpful because it gave people the bare minimum of understanding of like we're decent people, or that we're human beings, and that their prejudices are sin as opposed to us being the sin. Um, but the mindset there was that if he could do it, then we could do it. Like that was kind of the goal that we were aspiring to. Um, and it didn't help that it was also very controlled as well.
Oh,
Um,
jeez.
like a big part of that was we couldn't call ourselves gay. You couldn't call yourself gay because that means that you were identifying with the community. And that's what we could not do. We had to call ourselves same-sex attracted
That's a
because
big
that was
word
a
and
very
yep,
like a
that's a
very
big word.
matter-of-fact way of speaking about it, but you did not want to be associated with the community because that was sinful. That was your choice.
The
Um,
community was sinful?
yeah, or like obviously they were trying to separate the idea of like being born queer is not a sin, but the fact that like your actions are the sins in there. And if you're choosing to identify yourself with this community, you are choosing sin, that the community is sin.
That's weird logic.
Yeah,
Um,
a lot of steps.
wow. If he can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, that
Fuck,
was
man.
that I was almost convinced that that could happen. So I mean,
Really?
I started going on like frequent dates with this sister, and being like, maybe this is romance, that maybe this is, maybe I am developing feelings for her, and not realizing that I'm just making a really, really great friend, having a very close friendship with another woman, or with a woman, because in the campus we weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah.
So it even got
Can
to
I?
me where it's like you couldn't have a close friendship with anyone who was of the opposite sex, because that means you were weaseling.
Yeah.
Uh,
I want to go back a little bit to the conversations with the guy Hammond guy. Did they talk about how like the choice was like, did they talk about how you could just be celibate
yes,
or, yeah. And so for what I'm because I've been following numerous people over the few years, just trying to figure out what the conversations are happening out in just Christianity in general. And there's these guys that go on speaking engagements, much like Guy Hammond does, and he says, you can choose to overcome these emotions and have this, or you just live a single celibate life,
right.
and those are your only two options.
And they did a really good job of making it seem appealing. Um,
Hmm.
like I forget which scripture, but it's in the New Testament, and Paul's like, it may be better to be like to not have a wife, in order to control yourself better. And that was kind of like the mindset that we were given, is like you can either allow God to lead you towards a woman who is going to be totally okay with your situation, and maybe you'll fall in love with her, has some kids, or maybe you'll just have a really platonic relationship that revolves around being really close, or you can be celibate. But there is no in between of genuine love unless you can fabricate it in some way with a woman.
Fuck, man. Sorry, I just am like,
No.
it's so hard to, it's so hard to feel like to not have anger at the twisting of the scriptures for that. Our life is so way more nuanced than an either or mindset for anything.
Yeah.
And it just it's such a problem. I think I'm always wary of people that say, I remember one time my dad was telling me that they were going to have a guy talk about it was somebody who ministered to the gay community. And I've rarely ever heard any time that anyone or any person that said that where it was anything more than just saying like you're either going to be celibate or you're just going to have to pray through it. There's never like an acceptance or never this idea of like, I mean, this is who you feel you are. And so
Yep. Pray that gay away.
it's like, geez.
Yeah.
And
I
so
mean,
and at this time still nobody knows.
like maybe a few people know, like, at some point I got really tired of having to go into like D groups, and we're talking about purity, and having to um, basically twist the truth. Because obviously I can't come out and be like, yeah, sorry guys, I lusted after this brother who was being really spiritual on campus. Like my bad. It was really taxing and really hurtful
Wish she
on
would
my
have.
heart. What?
Man, that would have just thrown a wrench. They would have not known what to do with you.
I was way too afraid of that, because I mean, obviously, already people didn't know. I think I did eventually come out to my teen minister at some point when he was berating, or well, admonishing me and my brother during a I don't know, like a D group session.
Mhm.
Um, it's a whole thing. I won't go into it, but I think, yeah, eventually I did start coming out to some of my teen, or to my campus ministers, of people that I was who were leading me, that I was close to, because I did want to have I wanted to have like a genuine relationship with them, but also feel like they could help me, even if they didn't have the resources. And I think the ones who I was or like that God led me to confide in were great. They didn't really fully understand it, but they did the best they could to love me with what they had. Um, and that I think I came out to a few close friends who've like have become some of the best friends I've ever had in my life. Um, but really not too many people. Obviously, I was told within the church that I needed to be very selective slash not tell people. Like that was a directive coming from leadership. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, it made sense. Obviously, it has to there's wisdom in that because I might not be safe. Or it could start tainting my involvement in the church to the point where it's like it's a matter of perception. You didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but if no one feels comfortable around you being in the church, then we're gonna pull you out. That
Hmm.
sort of thing, which was also another huge fear of mine is being left without this community. Um,
Because
so
that community was all we had.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, people say like, why would you stay in something so long? But especially for those of us that were born into this, I mean, what else did we know?
yeah. It was home. I mean, like I think our slogan at North River was welcome home. Um, and that's the way that we wanted it to feel. Um, and that's kind of the way that I felt. But maybe I was just maybe I was just too desensitized to having to living in a dysfunctional family that I was kind of like, oh, this is normal. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, at some point I did in fact think that uh I could like grow feelings for this girl that I thought I liked. But I think it was during one date that we were on. We went to a food truck park, which was really awesome. The food was great. But I realized I was like, how how uh how terrible is this going to be for her if I'm wrong about this? We start going down the line and then I have to confess this to her and I have to tell her that she's not going to have the love and the romance that she wants to have in a relationship, and that if she wants to, she can make this huge sacrifice for me because I'm the problem. Like
Hmm.
that terrified me. So it's basically like, okay, cool. Well, I'm backing off. I don't want her to feel like I led her on, but I need to take a step back.
Yeah.
Um, cool all this off because I don't feel that way. I don't know how much more time I need to convince myself that that's not happening.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, it got me. That's the dating culture really got to me too. Um, and I don't, you know what? I don't think I came out to any sisters whatsoever. Because that was obviously a super huge no-no.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Hmm.
but at some point, which made things a lot more complicated for me, when I did start coming out to some of the brothers that I was close to, they started passing off any of, um, I mean, obviously they had some wisdom and only would do this with men, but any man who had like come out and said like, "Oh, hey, I struggle with this same-sex attraction or identify as this," I was their go-to
Oh,
because they didn't know how
geez.
to handle it. So that was a part of my ministry. I became the gay poster boy for the campus ministry, and I had a group of guys that I was solely responsible for with discipling based upon their status and sexual orientation. Obviously, they had other like D groups and disciplers, but that was a big part of like who I had to be for them. Um,
Did that feel good or did I mean,
it
was
was
it
scary.
scary?
Um, because it was in a kind of way it was affirming because it made me feel like I was mature and then it made me feel like I was more spiritual, but at the same
Mhm.
time I didn't have the resources. I was flying by the seat of my pants at all times and just trying to find generic ways to make the scriptures blend into what it is that they needed to hear. um but even then, like even like when you're trying to give someone advice but you're not taking it yourself, that's always how I
Yeah.
felt.
Hmm.
It was like, I'm trying to tell you what the right thing is supposed to look like, but I'm not perfect. And like I'm trying to do this, but it's not even working out for me. So maybe you'll maybe have a better go at it. Um, but yeah,
Geez, that sounds terrible.
it was scary. I mean, like I know that a few people have talked about this, but it's a regret that I have is like of leading them
Hmm.
improperly, and maybe causing them more pain uh than they would
Hmm.
have felt if they hadn't joined the church.
Yeah.
I think at a certain point when I started getting a bit more rebellious, um, I sat a group of the guys that I was really close to down, and I was like, I know that I shouldn't say this because I know that someone will come up and like uh um admonish me because the idea of someone going to a different church within our church is, no, no, absolutely not.
Hmm.
My sister got admonished um for taking a girl who was studying the Bible to like Bridgepoint.
Hmm.
They're like, she needed to come to this church. She didn't need to come to theirs. And I was like, we're all the same body, y'all. Chill out. Uh, but I mean, I talked to my guys and I was like, I would rather see you somewhere else, like not at this church, maybe at another church, and you be happy than to stay here and be miserable. Like
Yeah,
giving
that's a
them,
healthy attitude.
yeah, I'm giving them the out that I couldn't give myself.
Hmm.
Um, because for me, as like their leader, kind of like their older brother, I felt that I needed to be perfect. And if I wasn't, then that would cause them to stumble too, because they're realizing that like some of
Yeah.
these things may not be attainable. Some of these options may, like no matter how hard they try, they may not be able to achieve these things that the church is telling them will give them a better life and will give them the satisfaction of being right with God.
Yeah.
Uh, and I have a lot of regret there.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I was a teen worker for like 5 or 6 years, and there's countless things I wish I would have said, countless things that I wish I would have stand up and yelled. You know, we all have something. I was telling someone we all have blood on our hands a little bit for
yeah.
just things that have, we were a part of this system. So we were perpetuating it, whether we knew it or not,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
mean, and on the flip side of that, even though it was really scary and daunting, there were also really good moments in there too,
Hmm.
because I was able to help educate the campus ministry kind of from my own, or like some, well, especially the campus ministers on some of my own experience and like what things could not work. Um, I had a campus minister who he's such a great guy. I love him. And he didn't know any better. But when Guy Hammond was coming around, we were talking about getting like a little support group going. After one of his messages, maybe he'd come talk to us so that we could have um oh gosh, I don't remember what his ministry was called, but you had to pay to be a part of it. We wanted to have like a free chapter of it at North River. But we wanted that. We wanted to have kind of to have this support group. And my campus minister came up to me and he was like, hey, do you mind reaching out to so and so or like just talking and bringing it up so that maybe he can join maybe he can join your support group. And I was like, dude, I didn't know that he was same-sex attracted. Like you outed him to me. Um, and of course,
Oh
he didn't know
man.
that was a bad thing. He didn't know that that was a bad thing. So I was able to like gently educate him and be like, dude, I knew your heart was in the right place. I'm not like mad at you for this, but don't do this again. That is
Hmm.
a huge betrayal of trust. Um, if you wanted to, instead, you could have asked this guy if he felt comfortable coming up to me. Or you could have asked me first, like, hey, do you mind if I tell someone very generic that they can come to you as a resource for this? I was like, cool, yeah. I mean, as long as they'd gotten my consent to tell people about me, then I was
Hmm.
fine. But when it came to like someone outing someone to me, I was like, we got a long way to go here. This is a basic tenet. Like
Yeah.
you
I even know that you don't do that.
I mean, it's a lot more common sense now, I guess, especially in what we would call righteous faith-based communities,
Hmm.
because especially like if we're looking at it as a viewpoint of sin, you wouldn't just go out and be like, hey yo, like to the entire church, I saw that you were like drinking to excess last night. do you want to fix that? Like you have to be a bit more discreet and subtle about it. So,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, but yeah, he just didn't know. So it did give
Hmm.
me a lot of opportunities to help teach people, to watch them learn. Um, like I had a set of roommates, also twins. I don't know why it is that we always congregate together. But I lived with them for about 9 years, and I have watched their journey learning how to understand me, um, and my sexuality, and how it affects my role in the church and my image, my mental health. I have watched them grow um, so much. I mean, I live alone now. We haven't lived together in a couple of years, but I've watched them grow so much and learn how to love me as I am,
Hmm.
as opposed to looking at the scriptures and saying, well, this scripture says this, and you're bad, and we don't know what to do with you. Um, like that is something that I have genuinely, that's like one of the good things that I've genuinely gotten out of the ICOC, is that I have friends that are that close, who
Hmm.
are so like have learned, been in the trenches with me and my issues, and have still learned to love me throughout all of them. And you know, they're lifelong friends. Like they are so protective of me. Like when I tell them, if I've been bold enough to tell them I'm going out on a date with someone or with the dude, they're like, I hope it goes well. Like, tell us if it doesn't. Like, you shouldn't be with anyone that's not worthy of you. Like, I'm very
That's
protective.
awesome.
And that, like, that fills my soul up with so much
Mhm.
joy. But it has been years of effort for us to get to
Mhm.
that place. So even having a small amount of that in the campus ministry made me feel good. Um, because you never know, like, no matter the amount of compassion and empathy someone has, as even just being a member of the church, because that's, you know, kind of required, um, there are limits to that,
Mhm.
because people don't know a lot of things. So when they're uneducated, they're scared. Um, or they get nervous, and they don't, because there's, once again, there's no materials, there are no tools to be given to people to be like, okay, this is how you handle this. Um, like even I studied the Bible with a trans person, but I didn't know that he was trans. Um, and I made a bunch of stumbles in there as well, like when we were studying the Bible with him, because we didn't know he was trans, and we had gotten into the sin study and talked about like the wages of sin is death and blah 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 blah. Like this is, like our belief is that, you need to repent, that sort of thing. And kind of like brushing along the line of like, well, you're going to hell if you don't, that kind of thing, because that's a part of the culture.
Yeah, it was.
And then, when he was like, I can't believe you said that to me. Like, I'm a trans man. You don't know anything about that. And I was like, oh shit.
Damn.
I should have known a lot better. Um, so anything that I could do to help educate folks so that I felt safer was good for me.
Yeah, that's good. Um, it's great that you have friends that you can talk to now. I think that's something that, you know, I've lucky enough to have too, because we all need people that we can talk to about these things that we've gone through,
Yeah.
and it's hard to keep friends when you leave something like this. Um, especially if they're that, connected, and they don't see it the way you do.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, it's awesome, and a lot of people didn't get that.
Yeah.
You know.
And
Um.
I mean, and I am very sympathetic towards those people, because it was once again a large part of this culture.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
like to the point where I don't know how to make friends as an adult, because my
That's
friends are always provided for me. Um,
we always had so much time with them, you
yeah,
know. We had so much, we could shove a whole lifetime in a year when
yeah.
you think about the how much we were around them.
And for people, once again, is this idea of like, you get lifted up if you're sharp,
Hmm.
if you
Yeah.
are type A, if you are aesthetically pleasing, that sort of thing. So those people was a lot easier for them to make friends. It was a lot easier for them to be popular in the cliques that also ended up happening in
Oh
the
my
campus
God. Yeah.
ministry. And if
Hmm.
you weren't that, you were neglected, and it was hard for you to feel like you had friends. I mean, at a point in time, I was in that sphere, but then I got out of it. But you could always see it. It's
Hmm.
not like it wasn't recognizable that there were some guys who, in some cases, especially they're from Georgia Tech, they don't really have a lot of great social skills anyway, but um, who who didn't have a lot of friends because they
Yeah.
weren't they didn't have the the qualifications of someone who should be lifted up and should like that would gain a lot of traction or be influential within the ministry.
Well, what was
So
so hard about that is because you're sort of brought in thinking you're gonna have that,
yeah.
and then you're just left out in the cold.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
when you walk into that church, it's so fit. Like, I think that's the thing that draws a lot of people in is it's so crazy how loving everyone is, and a
mhm.
little too intense. Um, like everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you." They want to give you a hug. They want to know all about you. They like, and for the most part, it's genuine, which is what makes it scarier. Because a lot of people are just not used to that.
Yeah.
Um, and that is the idea that they think of when they come to this church, but over time,
Hmm.
that's not always the reality.
Yeah, if you didn't show the value or something, you just kind of got slowly pushed to the side. I mean, yeah, you're slowly pushed to the side.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, and me as a person, especially being a heavy introvert and also being super overwhelmed by the church, when a service was over, I'd maybe talk to one or two people that I wanted to see and then like dip out as soon as possible. So I didn't have to talk to anyone. And then,
Hmm.
getting pulled aside one time, like, why do you leave the service so early? I'm like, I don't want to be around you people, but not saying it like that. Just being like, this is, we've had this entire day. I'm overwhelmed. If we have a meeting after this, I want to have the opportunity to get lunch and maybe clear my mind for a little bit before I have to go into seeing people again. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's that expectation of is a lot of friendliness, the fellowship, a
Hmm.
lot of love, and sometimes not everyone receives that. Sometimes not everyone wants that, and being forced into it can be even worse than not
Yeah.
having.
Hmm. Totally. Um, so how did you start your exit? When
Ooh.
did you when did you know you had to leave? Was it a slow drip or was it like
It was
I'm out?
it was a little bit of a slow burn. I think it started in 2018. I moved to London for work for the year.
Wow. Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
and it was my first time living on my own, my first time leaving the country. Um, and like traveling that far and being away from family and friends where I didn't know anybody.
Hmm.
And obviously it was a weird thing in the church too, because well, it was announced in front of the entire church without my consent. So no, everyone knew where I was going to be.
Uh-huh.
And I started getting a lot of questions from leadership of like, well, why have you connected with so and so in this region or that region, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know where I'm living, dude. Like I didn't get my travel orders until the day of. So I'm
Wow.
plain looking at my address and being like, oh, I wonder where this is. Luckily they have a car coming to get me when I get there, but it was like 3 a.m. when I arrived. Um,
Jeez, you didn't even know where you were going?
yeah, I mean, that's the biz.
All right.
But like yeah, there's a lot of people who seemed really concerned for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like once again, like just with the church, it was a lot of like control. They needed to know the information so they could know what to do with you and who's going to keep who's going to keep eyes on you. And in
Mm-hmm.
some way that would seem like comforting, but it was a barrage. Like to the close to the day that I was leaving, um, like I've been going through the stressful process of getting a visa and like packing my life away for a while, trying to find someone who can take over my or who can maybe take over my rent at my apartment, which like we couldn't for a while. So I was paying my rent while I was in London. Luckily, my apartment and my car and stuff were all paid for by the studio that I worked with, so that was great. But it was a lot of stress. And then I've got people down my neck about like, well, why don't you know where you're living? We need to get you in touch with this region leader, these folks that you can talk to. And I'm like, you got to let me get there first.
Yeah.
Uh, and by the time I did end up getting there, it wasn't, I was kind of a little concerned about trying to get like plugged in with one of the churches over there, but I was more concerned about trying to make sure my life was working, like
Yeah.
just uprooted my life. And now I'm trying to figure out, okay, so I got to figure like I'm using a new currency. I got to figure out what that means for my bank account. I got to figure out where I'm getting food. I was sharing a car with two other people. I don't know the landscape. I don't feel confident enough to know how the city works. Um, and then by the time I got there, my purpose there was to work.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and we're working long hours. Of course, I'm also sharing a car with two other people. So if I wanted to go home, I had to wait until they were done with their workday as well.
Oh,
So
geez.
working long hours Monday through Friday, but also I'm handling another production that's doing additional photography in LA. So
Hmm.
my days are split between like, okay, I have to be awake long enough to make sure that I finish the shooting day, or at least know what happened at the end of the shooting day for LA when it's like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Or, you know, they were shooting, yeah, they shot on a Friday. So Saturday is going to be a day of me catching up with what happened in LA. And then Sunday is like more work and prepping for what's happening on Monday. So my existence there was work. So I wasn't focused or concerned about getting in touch with the church.
Yeah.
Uh, I would still, I would like, I was pretty consistent about having our live screen up. So I'd have one of my laptops like connected via like HDMI cable to my TV and have like North River's live stream set up in the afternoon while I'm working and watching it. And like, I had a really great family group. So they would try to keep in touch with me once again, like really great friends. They send me care packages. They would check in via WhatsApp and be like, yo, how's it going? How are things? Anything you want us to pray for? Do you need any help? That sort of thing. Um, like we can talk to your parents about getting a joint care package so it doesn't cost as much, that kind of stuff. And I still
Wow.
felt plugged in, but I wasn't plugged in with the London church.
Hmm.
And it gave me an opportunity of freedom, one, for a lot of maturity. I had to go through a lot of growth, a lot of growing up while I was there. Um, but also giving me this opportunity to have some freedom to figure out who I am and be able to present that authentically and genuinely to the people I'm around. Because ain't no one know me there.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm just this weird, like, I'm just this like weird mixed American dude. Um, and like people could always tell that I'm American because I smile. And I'm like, wait, do you guys not do that here? So I mean, there's always that. There's also that like that kind of working against me, but I was able to try to like build new friends, show them who I was, not have to be like, I'm the church dude and you should come to church with me. And like,
Yeah.
I can't tell you anything about my personal life because it's not safe for me, that kind of thing. I mean, I work in the film industry. There are all kinds of people there. So there's really no room to judge. People still do. Um, I've I have dealt with some racism and microaggressions at work there as well, but that's life.
Yeah.
Um, so that experience, that full year was a real stepping stone for me to be like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to still stay plugged in with the church and try to like live spiritually, but also to branch out a little bit, um, I'd have obviously in London, there are pubs everywhere, and all that people want to do after work is go to a pub and hang out. So we're just drinking. And like
Yeah.
sometimes they would have sometimes most of the times I would have boundaries because even when I turned 21, I wasn't super into drinking to begin with. But like there are a couple of times, like the weekends, we'd go out to a pub and get drunk with our friends and just chill out or like walk around. And I think that being so sheltered in the church, you don't have it, like you mentioned, there's not a lot of stuff you can go through at that point in time to feel like you're you really need it. Like you really
Hmm.
need salvation. So like you have opportunities to go out and figure out what it is that you like, and you learn about what it is that you don't like, the things that you don't want to do ever again. I think I went on my first date with a dude in London.
Hmm.
Uh, and obviously this is like my mid 20s, so I knew this didn't work. Like I was like, how does this work? It's not an encouragement date. I don't like have anything planned with one. We met up at a pub, but also his brother was there and their friends were watching a soccer match, and it was just super awkward, but it happened. Or sorry, football match. Like, gotta make sure I
Yeah,
get.
no, huh?
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was a pretty interesting year of me seeing what my life could look like if I were taking control of it because I had to there.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, by the time I got back at the end of the year in 2018, I was yeah, a bit more emboldened, a lot more confident in myself. But I still went back to the church because I was like, okay, so this is my norm. I left for a year and a half to come back because this is still my family. I still live with disciples. My family is still like my actual physical family is still in this church. I don't know anything else, and that is my norm. Like this past year has
Yeah.
been a blip for me. Um, so it was kind of just natural to go back, but the seeds were already there of like there's something wrong with this. I mean,
Hmm.
they've always been there, but you start recognizing them more when you've been away for a long time. Um, the one of the big things that like stuck out to me was I'd have random people coming up to me and being like, "Oh, we thought you fell away." And I'm like, "You don't know me."
Thought you
Like
fell away.
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I haven't like physically been here because I was living in a different country, but you assumed that I just left the church and fell away because you hadn't seen me in a few months. I mean, it was a year. So,
Yeah.
but like you, once again, you also don't know me. You've never had a conversation with me before. So I'm glad that I can come back and affirm your idea of who I am as a person. Um, and that just kind of it set me off the amount of rumors that were going around that I came back to.
Oh,
Um,
geez.
so I mean, I stayed in it pretty heavily in 2018 or 2019 was a hard year for me in general because work got really bad. I tried to date someone I started dating someone in the ICOC. That didn't work out. Um,
Like
but
a female?
no, another dude.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was interesting. But it didn't work out.
Hmm.
Uh, but then the real test, so like the real stuff is when the pandemic started and we went into lockdown.
Hmm.
Uh, that is when so many people and the church's true colors really came out. Um,
Interesting.
because
Why?
it was some small things and then some big things. I think like one of the biggest ones was the amount of police brutality against Black people that was happening in a lot of the murders, like George Floyd,
Hmm.
Breonna Taylor, that kind of thing, and how we as a community were hurting, especially as people of color, the Black community, um, were hurting. And we had people in the church who also were empathetic to that. But all that we could really do was pray. We could not talk about it as a congregation. We were
Mm.
we were told that we could talk about it in small groups and like we need to get our feelings out about it. We could do that. But as a church, we never spoke about that or spoke out against that brutality or what it looks like to be there for your brothers in mourning, your brothers and sisters in mourning, and all of this kind of stuff that really would have been healing for people of color in the church. Um, and one of the one of the things that someone kind of got me onto is this idea of like the the people who are paying our mortgage, the East Cobb snobs, are a lot more conservative. They're more the conservative white folks in the church.
Hmm.
And if that makes them uncomfortable, like this is a divisive issue, and that might make them uncomfortable. So we have to protect our interests in this church as a business, and we can't talk about that stuff. Uh,
That's fucked up.
uh, which
Jeez.
which is a part of me wasn't surprised, but when that idea became, um, what's the word? Plausible for me, I was like, oh shit, that's bad. It
Hmm.
also did not help that I think a brother and a family group, or like one of the married family groups, who was a leader, had said something pretty insensitive during one of their Zoom meetups or whatever, and a brother of like a person, a brother, a black person, a brother of color, was like that was really hurtful, like, and tried to explain things to him. And of course, the way that the church works, this man had to get up in front of the entire church or during our live stream, um, and tell everyone what not or like confess and tell everyone what he did. He didn't go into details, but and tell everyone's like, yeah, I said something super insensitive, and I didn't mean to. I'm trying to learn. There's a lot of talk about how much they're trying to learn, which in a sense it's nice, but we also had some of our elders and deacons come up and be like, "Hey, please be patient with us. We've never had to talk about this stuff before." And that got me. That set me off because I was like, "This church has been around since the '60s. You fossils have been here since the '60s when civil rights were a big issue, and you've never, in the past 60 years, close to 60 years, had to talk about
It's
like
just because
this kind of stuff."
it's because we have the ability to leave the conversation and y'all don't.
Right.
And so unless you want to be a part of the conversation, we have the, I don't know what is it, a privilege of leaving it because of our race, and we can surround ourselves with not the issue,
Yeah.
where you walk everywhere and it is the issue because it's and I'm not standing up. I hope that doesn't sound that I'm standing up for him. I'm just
No, no,
saying
I
that.
understand. I mean, I've had a few talks with folks over time who are like, we just like that needed that education. They didn't know, or I think there was one guy that who was asking like, hey, yeah, during the pandemic, I was trying to be there for these guys, but I didn't know how, and they're kind of pushing me away. And I was like, it wasn't about you, dude.
Mhm.
They needed time to like deal with this emotionally. It was
Yeah.
good that you were trying to be there for them, but there was nothing you could do other than to say that you had their backs.
Yeah. The worst thing about stuff like that is like be patient with me, or I didn't mean to, or stuff is it kind of switches everything away from the issue and onto the person,
Right.
and that's it's a very challenging thing. Um
And it also in a way reaffirmed something that we all knew was there, but we
Mhm.
didn't talk about it, and that there's still somewhat rampant racism within this church. Um, Even
Yeah.
looking at the way that we split up North River to Bridgepoint. Once again, it's not even a mile. Like you could easily walk from North River to Bridgepoint, and I want to say about 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But mostly the white folks went to North River, and all the black folks
Mhm.
went to Bridgepoint, right down the street from each other. Never really took any time to get together or do anything. And it just on both sides, there's a twinge of racism in there that is
Mhm.
unspoken, but it's over
Yeah.
time becomes more and more palpable when it comes to little things like I mentioned on campus, where we couldn't go to the Bible talks for the greater Atlanta folks at our school. We're all disciples, but we couldn't go to them for some
Mhm.
reason. Or, when
Yeah.
leaders would get up and say, well, we're meeting with this church to kind of talk about how we can interact more and get educated. I'm like, y'all, it's once again too little too late.
Mhm.
But you're showing your hand, so great.
Mhm. The division was always there, um from the beginning. We just had the umbrella of the whole church,
Yeah,
you know like the regions were separated geographically, and you could see sort of everything that you're saying, you know
tertiary mentoring.
yeah, there was definitely, where we were as kids, there were a lot more people of color around us
Yeah,
than if you went to another region that was 10 miles away. And you can say it's geographic all day long, but I don't know, it's hard to keep saying that
yeah,
after a while. And
years
then
and
when
years of it.
the umbrella goes away, it's just, no, we'll just stay like this. It's
Yeah,
easier this way. So
yeah.
everybody saw it. nobody was talking. None of us were talking about it. Or maybe I don't know. I was trying to get through my own crap from everything that was going on in my life with the church and with all this stuff. But
Yeah. I mean, that it became more glaring, and that was a big
Mhm.
reason why I like finally made the steps to leave. I think
Mhm.
another big thing, another it wasn't big, but it like, it's like when you're already having a bad time and then you find out that your shoelaces are untied and you just start like
Yeah.
that's the start of your breakdown. Um that
Yeah.
for me that for me was like being a part of the worship ministry and using like of course we were all happy to serve, and that was the worship ministry was always my biggest joy in the church because I got to do something that I loved that I was really good at. Um, and when we started going to, or when we started figuring out, like, okay, so we're all in lockdown. At a certain point, it's kind of like, what was it? Well, we couldn't be out on the roads at a certain time. It almost felt like martial law a little bit, or else if you were driving and it wasn't for something like just to go get groceries or something, then the
Yeah.
police would like pull you over, that kind of junk. Um, so they all figured out like, okay, this is a number of people that the CDC is safe to be in a building together if they're as long as they're 6 feet apart. So we just had our AV team. We had a producer who was kind of like the producing the whole service, and then we had the worship team a and like our evangelist for the day. So, we're all there early for rehearsal, and to get the service going and try to make it as best as we can, like as good as possible as we can, and then coming back every week to a small list of complaints or things we need to do better, which, I'm fine with
Oh,
criticism to a
jeez.
point, like um, but it was starting to like dumb stuff, in my opinion, where it's like, okay, guys, you need to smile more. John specifically, you need to smile more. Like, look like you're happy to be here. And I'm like, I'm not. The world is on fire and people are dying all around us. And we don't know if it's really safe to be together because we don't know how this virus is working. So yeah, I'll try to be more cheerful. We had to like got complaints about being more energetic. At one point, people were complaining that we didn't look like we were 6 feet apart from each other. So we had to
Oh,
fix that. And they were like,
jeez.
we think you guys should be wearing masks while you're singing. And then we think you should be wearing face shields while you're singing. This is coming from people who are sitting at their own day in their own damn homes in their PJs watching the service in the morning. Um, and trying to like, giving feedback, whatever, but like not understanding, like, do you know how hard it is to sing through a mask and on a face shield into a microphone and still be heard? Also while trying to stay conscious, that is just it's not possible.
Yeah.
um and then like the complaints started to get a little more, I would say, childish. Like one complaint that we got is that we needed to start the service with less complicated songs because everyone was waking up and it was too early for them to really get into that spirit, or
Oh,
to
God.
like to sing along with these songs. Like, yeah, it's like it's different when we're singing with with the congregation, but we're just singing in our house. It makes us feel really awkward. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry you feel awkward. When I've had to be here since 8 a.m. and like there's no one, like we're all getting temperature checked walking into this building.
Yeah.
We're all having to do like, we have like marks on the ground on the stage to say like, this is where you stand. We've measured it at 6 feet apart. Maybe we're going to do 6.5 feet, but also making sure that you're still in the view of the camera. Um, all this stuff. And it started chipping away at the joy of this service and worshiping God and turning it into a job.
Yeah.
When I was under performance review all the time. Like if you, I don't, I mean, I don't think they even went this far, but it's like we had to attempt to try to be a little bit color coordinated as well, because, if the lights, like, if what we were wearing didn't like match with the lights they were playing, it might make us stand out a little bit more, that kind of stuff. And it set me off in a way that I was like, is it even worth it to do this?
Mhm.
um, is it worth it for me to show up and do this on every Sunday and then, you know, have to feel the stress of like, okay, I really hope that I didn't get sick today, we don't know where everybody's been. We're all trying to do the right thing, but people be lying. Um, so I think, well, obviously we were still in a lot of locked. Well, I think I started going back to work. The studio forced us to go back to work in like um the summer of 2020. So I was back, under heavy protocol with work at a studio filming while also having to like add in this extra um complication of working around the church and how to figure out that with the pandemic. Um And then in 2021, I spent about a third of the year on and off in London.
Hmm.
So by the time I came back in like mid-November of 2021, I was like, yeah, I just don't think I'm coming back. It was very much like it was a very silent exit. I just stopped coming. And I talked to my roommates about it, and because obviously it's like they're still part of the church, and you know, they're wondering why I'm not waking up with them or driving to church every Sunday and like what's going on with that. And I'm like, I need time. I've seen enough. I know that I felt enough to understand that like where I'm at with this church is not healthy. Um, a lot of the stuff that I've seen has not helped me in any way. It's made me feel worse. Um, and for people, I mean, and they understood because they're two people who love me and watch me like not taking care of myself. Like, if that's what's going to help you out, dude, then do what you need to do. Um, so yeah, I think I left officially in the at the end of 2021, going into 2022.
Hmm.
Um, because obviously my mental health wasn't great. No one's mental health was great with the pandemic and lockdown anyway, but
No, it wasn't. Mm-mm.
I was already massively mentally ill and not in therapy at the time. So when I officially started therapy with my current therapist, it was mid 2021, and it was right before I was going back to London for the second time. So when I got back, I was like, I'm committed to going to therapy because I need this shit so bad.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
what I don't need is going into every week where Sunday is my most stressful day of the week.
Hmm.
um like that's a big red flag. That's wrong. So I just stopped coming. I'm still in touch with a lot of people with some people from the church. Another great thing about lockdown was that it gave you the opportunity, or at least it gave me the opportunity to really weed out like weak friendships, weak relationships, where it's like we call ourselves friends because we're in the church together, but we're more like acquaintances.
Yeah.
And also to weed out people who cause me a bunch of stress or were just using me. The number of campus brothers who will get close to you because you have a car
Ooh.
and then not pay you gas money because they don't have money. Like there are a few guys like that just every time I got with them, the only question in my head is like, what do you want? But I couldn't say that because I didn't want to be mean to them. Um, and they would
Yeah.
take advantage of my generosity. Uh, so
So many rides given. So many rides given.
like yeah, it's the same thing with like going out on dates. So like someone would only ask you to double with them because they don't have a car and you do.
Hmm.
Uh, so it whatever. But yeah, that was a pretty big waking up point for me. Was all the things that I'd seen and had experienced were just too much
Yeah.
for me to handle. Like I could not have. Um, I had a oh geez, I had a pretty terrible mental breakdown, I think in 2017 at Disney World. Um, that's
Disney
and looking
World.
back at it now, it's kind of hilarious, but it was really, really bad. Um, and it started reminding me that like, oh, I am mentally unwell and I need to do something
Hmm.
about this. Um, but it wasn't. I had started going to therapy then, but it wasn't really taking it seriously. My therapist and I could only meet every 2 weeks. He also wasn't, he was he was an emergency recommendation. Because I was living in Marietta at the time and his office was in Swanee. So
Hmm.
about an hour drive for me north. But he was a licensed sex therapist, like a couples sex therapist. So, but it was also he was a Christian therapist. So that was the only that was basically the only thing. that he had going for him was that he was a Christian therapist and he was an emergency recommendation because I was doing so poorly.
Hmm.
Mm. And then after finally meeting my new therapist who, it's really great having someone who understands where you're coming from, as opposed to just being like, yeah, we're both brown, both people of color, and both Christians, so I guess it should all work out. But having someone who's actually invested in my well-being and care, and then once again, who doesn't know me, doesn't have an understanding of what our church is or
Hmm.
was, the ICOC is, and then, like slowly opening up the boxes where I've stuffed so much of my pain and personality and fear away into and start pulling things out of it. And it's really difficult, but being like, yeah, I should have done this a long time ago. I didn't realize how much this was actually
Hmm.
hurting me. Um, yeah,
That's a hard thing to reconcile with too, knowing you were in something for too long. Um, the amount of time spent in something when you could have been, I did a lot of like, I could have been doing all these other things in my life, but yet I was in this.
yeah.
I think it takes, for one, it takes strength to be able to identify that something isn't healthy for you and to walk away from. Because, to walk away from it is not just walking away from a church, you're walking away from an entire life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, so like when you left, I mean, where have you landed? I mean, with everything, you
I'm
know.
still trying to work that out. I mean, there's a part of me that feels a little bit agnostic because,
Hmm.
I do believe in a higher power. I definitely believe that something else is at work in this universe than
Hmm.
just human beings, because if it was just human beings, then that would affirm a lot of the bad things that I feel about myself. But I do believe in a higher power. I want to believe that it's God, or I want to believe that it's the Christian God, and that,
Hmm.
I want to have a good relationship with him. But I need time to figure that out. Obviously, need to work through a lot of the religious trauma, because I have tried to go to other churches, tried to find LGBTQ affirming churches, and all I could do when I sat in there was think about how it wasn't like the ICOC, and it made me so uncomfortable.
Dude, yeah.
Um, and
I can't walk into a church and not like, dude, I mean, I've been gone for so long and I'm still doing that.
it's a huge wake up call.
It
Like,
is,
I
man.
can't believe I went into this church hoping to feel love and acceptance, and all I'm doing is judging their service or judging the way that things are going, because that's not like what I'm used to.
Well, I don't know if you've heard about a coffee shop, Land of a Thousand Hills.
I used to live there, yeah.
Yeah, well, I used to work for them for years, and it was right after I left the church, and I got one of the things that I don't know if they still do this, but we would go on these marketing trips to Christian music festivals. And so like I got like and we'd also market to churches in and around Atlanta. And so I got thrown from like one system to seeing everything, and it was always so wild because I would be like, ooh, this is like they're not supposed to say that or they're not supposed to do that. It was just it like it just but that never goes away,
Yeah. I
you
think
know?
a brother and I think we were living together. We went to visit Passion City one time, and
Oh,
we were just
that's
tearing a sermon apart. Like,
yeah.
man, that makes no sense. This is really bad advice. That's not biblical.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've been there twice serving them. I would set up their coffee for the backstage.
yeah,
It's wild things,
so
but
wild.
yeah,
Uh,
man. Yeah, time helps. That's the
yeah.
biggest thing.
So I mean, I need to continue working through a lot of my religious trauma, because it is so, like, you know, what was it? 28 years of my life being in this church. That's a lot of
Mhm.
time, uh,
Yeah.
of some pretty awful things to sink into your being and into
Mhm.
your soul. So I got to work on that. But I think if I wanted, I have a very, very hard fear or a very intense fear of feeling like I'm back into a corner, and that all I'd have left is to go back to the ICOC and feel trapped there.
Mhm.
So something that I'm really interested in at some point is probably doing a little bit more exploring. But if it lands like where I want it to land within the Christian faith, I would want to study the Bible all over again. Different context. I like obviously not the studies that the ICOC does. We recognize that those are manipulative and brainwashing, but um, I would want to start a new relationship with God and a new understanding because I
Yeah.
have a lot of the facts here, a lot of the like spiritual facts running around in my head, but I have no connection to them, um, like on a spiritual soul level, because all I was doing was trying to survive,
Yeah.
never thriving in the church.
Hmm.
So I would want, yeah, I'd want to start that again. I'm still on the fence about it, but if that is where I want to go, if I want to come back to the Christian faith, which is something that, that is, I'm on the fence about, I would want to start afresh, like
Hmm.
from the bottom up.
Yeah. There's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of people you can talk to.
Yeah.
Um, so what do you think, man? We were in a cult?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot. Because we used to joke about that, a
Hmm.
little bit like, oh yeah, we're a cult because people called us a cult. There was a website I think called reveal.com that was
Yeah.
basically this scathing overview of all the things that made us a cult.
Hmm.
That I never looked at, but like a few of our people who were studying the Bible in campus got scared away by that. Um, so I've been really cautious about wanting to call it that because I didn't want to be disparaging to a bunch of people that I really love. Like, there's a lot of good stuff that came out of it,
Hmm.
but you have to be able to separate the people from the institution and sometimes include the people in the institution because they have made it what it is.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until like I want to say last year when a couple of friends of mine were started watching The Vow on HBO Max. Um, and they're like, oh, it's about this cult, it's about the Nexium cult, and like they weren't giving a bunch of information, but they were like, it's super intense, it's a bit uncomfortable. You might need to take breaks while you're watching it because it's really creepy. Um, and I started watching it and I was desensitized to it, of course. So I was like, this is the ICOC. This is like to a T with different flavor and different branding on it. This is the ICOC. I was like, if they're calling that place a cult and this leader of that group is now in jail for a bunch of things that he did and helped perpetuate, then we can easily call the ICOC a cult.
Hmm.
Um, we can easily see that in some cases there are people who should be in jail for my church who aren't because we swept a lot of things under the rug, especially a lot of the sexual abuse.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, to me it is a cult. I'm not saying everyone in it are like I'm not saying everyone in it deserves to be called cult members because there are a lot of people who are still there who are actively trying to have like a real relationship with God and being there like I think God has put them there to help people truly learn how to have a relationship with God despite the institution itself. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a cult.
Well, thank you, John, for coming on and sharing your story. And I don't take it lightly that you chose me to put it out to the world. I'm humbled. I'm always humbled by it. And, you know, I love it. Stories connect, stories heal, and you're adding to that. So
Yeah.
it's awesome.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. It was great to reconnect with you when I saw that because I saw the Aaron's post
Hmm.
on the have you had your quiet time meme
Hmm.
page. And I was like, this guy's voice sounds really
I
familiar.
know.
Let me look at this
Yeah.
podcast. It said Roy Clemens. And I was like, oh, I know that man.
I
Uh,
know.
so no,
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for the platform you started and the conversation
Yeah.
about because it is, like I said, it like listening to these has been difficult, but also super therapeutic because I don't feel like I'm crazy anymore.
I know. And guess what? You're going to help someone else feeling a little less crazy. So that's a cool
That's my
thing
hope.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So thank you guys for listening. If you were a part of the ICOC or know somebody that was and wants to come on and share your story, you can contact me through the Balance Meal PCast at gmail.com or just find the Balance Mail podcast on Instagram. You can direct message me. So thank you guys for listening, for your support, and talk to you guys soon.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.